Welcome to my podcast, Magic Brain Kicks, and welcome to an episode about change, about anthropology, about social anthropology, and about to be a human in this modern world with all these current challenges. And I invited an expert for social anthropology. I welcome Ida Svenonius. Hi, Ida. And I say welcome to Stockholm because Ida is Swedish and currently in Stockholm. And of course, you studied social anthropology at the University of Cambridge, and you are working in the, I would say, digital surrounding at hubraum, that's the incubator of Telekom here in Berlin. And it's a very wonderful combination, I would say. You are digital and a culture expert. And of course, I'm very interested, it's this wonderful combination. It sounds totally interesting and perfect for the current challenges. But why did you study both, and what was your motivation to do that?
Well, first of all, thanks for that introduction. It wasn't so conscious as it might sound. So when we say this is a good combination for solving big challenges, I've always been drawn to big challenges, but I've never really known which tools are going to be the most relevant. So basically throughout my life, I just followed my curiosity and my interests. And actually I started out as a filmmaker back in the day. And what I've always been really interested in is what motivates people. Why do we behave in one way but not the other way? What really drives what we believe is possible? And then anthropology, which is basically the study of culture and the study of humans in groups, really took that interest to a higher level. What's driving us as a society, not just as people. So it follows this thread of understanding humans, really. And then it just happens that as the world is developing, we're having more and more of these really deep human challenges, things like populism or different kinds of dualism, believing that there's only two points of views and opposing each other. Or especially now in Corona, how are we going to restructure our societies once this crisis is over? And also, in that context, what do we believe is possible? So what anthropology is so good for is really challenging the notion of what's normal, because you study cultures everywhere and you realize, wait, we're not at all doing it in the same way. In some ways we have similar structures behind how we create our cultures, but there's so many options for what we can believe. And once you realize that, you have a lot of option and a lot of belief in what's possible. So that's what's so exciting about anthropology. And then really my journey into tech was also a bit random, following my curiosity. So after I graduated from Cambridge, I basically ran into a startup team. They were launching in Cambridge, but also in London, and they were working in artificial intelligence for healthcare. And I thought, if there's ever been a huge challenge, it's how do we streamline and work more effectively with healthcare. So, I thought that was a really interesting challenge. And I ended up joining them and doing marketing for them and sort of thinking about which narratives do we need as a culture in order to feel safe that technology has a role to play for our health. So, that was also following my instinct and trying to shape what's possible in that industry. And then because I got so deep into tech and into AI, all of a sudden, I knew that I wanted to move to Berlin because it's just, one of my favorite places. I'm sure you agree. It's such a good city. Hands down, my favorite place. So I went looking for places that have this kind of big challenge that they're solving, working with tech, and would have a need for communications and culture. So I found then hubraum, the startup incubator of Deutsche Telekom. And, they're working on challenges like what's the role going to be for a huge corporate in the future? How can corporates support the overall startup ecosystem, all the innovation that's there in order to shape this new reality? So basically, Telekom can give a platform for a startup that has really interesting ideas. And then when they work together, that's where the real wide-scale solution can come. So Yeah, I do feel in hindsight that there is a red thread to to my motivations in this. But overall, I've always been driven by creating some kind of impact and by finding different tools from different industries. I don't really care where they come from or which discipline they come from, as long as they serve the challenge or as long as they can answer the question. So, you know, I'm really passionate about methods and about combining thoughts from anthropology, combining thoughts from tech, combining things from storytelling and filmmaking, or whatever else I've picked up along the way, and combining all of those to really think more broadly about all of these challenges. Yeah, that's really exciting for me. You know, how do we get from point A to point B? It's not always the route that we thought. It could be a different one.
Yes. Yes, and to have all these opportunities and several methods from different kind of sciences, it's very interesting also to me, of course. No? And it's and currently, of course, we have these social beliefs, these cultural beliefs in many things that behavior is yes different, especially for the migration backgrounds in Germany, or the other current yes frightened tools in word racism and everything, and especially to for the history to work, especially the German history is very heavy, and of course there are cultural signs, there are beliefs, and I think it's now the time to change all this and to reflect about this. And is it possible to learn something from this yes different cultural beliefs to go to this process, or to give it to a community, to a working community, or to a normal social community?
Yeah, well, I think the three main things that I really apply from anthropology when it comes to shaping the world around me, if I can, or in the ways that I can, is partly one, the thing about questioning what's normal. Even having that question top of mind can shift your perspective, because we are basically geared or programmed to accept the reality that we're in, because it takes a lot of energy to always be thinking about new kinds of options. It's not the easy route. So it's not, and most of us are on autopilot. So even I guess Corona actually is a very useful opportunity to realize that it could be so different. Even 1 week to the next, we were living different lives. And obviously this was a massive crisis, but maybe there are some other ways that we can also shape what we thought had to be a certain way. And so having that question top of mind just allows you to think about what else is possible. That's one of the most useful tools, but it's really more like an intention. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is that anthropology is really useful for thinking about how you can build and analyze cohesion and community, like you said, you know, what actually keeps us together. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's really important is you need something consistent, and you need some kind of stability in complexity. And right now, actually, I would say it was definitely like this before, but even more now after the crisis, that we are living in a very complex world. Yeah. And there's a lot of different moving parts. It's really hard to say where we'll be even in a few months. Mm. And, you know, what's going to change. And when you have that kind of complexity as humans, we're really drawn to some kind of stability. And if you're aware of this, you can create stability for yourself in a way that's not really harmful. So I think for a lot of us, we end up looking for answers, and we look for truths, and we look for narratives. And that's really nice for us, because it's like, well, now I know what I believe, so now I can go back on autopilot, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But one thing that I really enjoy doing instead is thinking about method, because sometimes we can feel as safe if we know the process of something as we would if we know the answer to something. So that's the purpose of a ritual. For example, if you know that every morning when I wake up, it looks like this. I have my tea, I have my whatever toast, and then I work on my computer for this long, and then I do this. And just that feeling of having a process or a ritual can make you feel safe. And the more rituals you're able to create, both for yourself, but also for the community that you're in, the stronger, if it's a effective ritual, the stronger the cohesion is going to feel, or the stronger sense of safety and belonging you'll have. So I'm really fond of this idea that methods can be more important than answers. And when we're in the method space, we're then open actually to listening. So we could be finding out new answers, but we feel safe enough that we have the process to get there. And then the third thing would be this idea that even though we're living in a society, you might call it that, or a culture, I think it's really tempting sometimes to say, well, my culture is like this, so I don't have a choice. I'm just living here like a normal human. Someone else can change it. Maybe politics can change it. I'm just going to sit here. But actually, the way culture works, it's that it's co-created by each and every one of us. So you are very much a cultural agent. And especially if you are in a position of power of any kind, at work, for example, if you're anyone's manager, then you have an even stronger power in creating culture, because people are looking for you and looking at you and thinking, wait, what is she doing at the moment? And maybe I should behave this way. And maybe this is how this workplace works. Because we don't just have one big culture, we have lots of smaller cultures in families and workplaces and even groups of friends everywhere. So if you start realizing that you are actually a cultural agent, and the way that you act influences the culture that you create around you, then you also have a lot more power. And we can start thinking again more about the method rather than just the impact that we can measure in 5 years. Actually, you're having a lot of impact on other people right now, just for the way that you behave. And especially because I know that you're really passionate about diversity and inclusion, this is a huge thing to remember, is that, however many KPIs you have, at the end of the day, diversity and inclusion happens today in this meeting right now. And the way that you lead it and the way that you structure it, that's how you build culture. So those are the three things that I really focus most on when it comes to applying these cultural tools to my life and people around me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I like that, because it's all, you can do it in the workplace or although on the individual or social level or in your normal social environment. And it's very interesting to be aware of all this. That's the first thing, of course, to be aware that you are a cultural agent and that you can be a leader and a role model if you behave or do other things or begin to do other things. And of course, the most changes in the world come from single persons who do it different, who have this helicopter perspective or a vision. It could be different. Our living together could be different, or other things could be different. We can fly or whatever we are thinking about. It changed the world, of course. And therefore, it sounds really to be aware of these 3 steps every day, and to be able to own rituals, or when rituals are not fitting, then you have to change it, of course, for other answers or to get other answers.
Yeah,
wonderful. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, of course, this especially diversity and to include other cultural agents, I would say. Do you have there some answers from the anthropology or from your experience to do this? Because it's, of course, the 2 main topics now.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most interesting analogies, actually the first time we met, I mentioned this, and it's been sticking to my mind ever since, is that diversity and inclusion can be thought of as 2 separate things. In a way, where diversity is basically an invitation to a party, but inclusion is the invitation to dance. And now, from what I can see, it seems that we're pretty good at inviting people to the table. So we have a lot of women on the table. We have people from different backgrounds. But the thing is, that's where culture comes in. Do you, as a person who's not representing the normal, do you feel safe to actually express the radical new perspectives that you're sitting on? You know, how are the people around the table interacting with you, including you, literally including you in the conversation? And what are the methods that these people have put to use in order to make you feel safe and included and valued? I think the better attention you can pay to culture, the more likely it is that you get the actual inclusion and not just the diversity. And there are some qualities that anthropologists basically have to cultivate, because otherwise you can't do the job, you can't study it as well. And one thing is obviously listening, because you're trying to understand another culture, and you can't really do that if you're only looking for a certain kind of answer, because you wouldn't be open then to what the culture is actually like. So listening is really important. And empathy, you know, trying to envision what these people are feeling and going through, and how their experience of life is very true to them. You know, the better you can understand what their experience of life, or anyone else's experience of life is actually like, the more likely you are to be able to integrate that perspective as well, because you understand it, and you have empathy for their point of view, and most of all their experience, not just their thoughts, but also their feelings and full lived experience. And then I think this one is so important. Honestly, it's not been a strength of mine for the first few years when I was growing up. I'm learning, every day is a learning. But it's really, really important to be humble. Because if you think you already have the answers, that's it. You know, why are you inviting people with a different frame of mind to your table if you're pretty sure that the only one who needs to sit there is you? You're never going to find the true depth of the new kinds of solutions that you could have found from the people that you invited. So, you know, once you listen and you try to approach it with empathy and humility, then you can start looking for solutions instead, and you can be willing to change. And that's the thing with this, it's the same as choosing autopilot or not. I mean, it's hard. It takes energy. It's not that you necessarily always want to spend your entire day thinking about someone else's lived experience. I mean, my lived experience also gives me a lot of grief sometimes. Like, why am I focusing so much on other people? But the thing is, this is how you get to innovation. And this is how you find new methods and new constellations of perspective. And sometimes I think that's also lost, you know, when you focus so much on diversity and not on inclusion. It becomes about showing that, you know, this is how many women we have. This is how many nationalities we represent, or something. And you're very proud of that, and you should be. But unless you also focus on the inclusion part, you might also forget why you did it in the first place. Because the reason why you're inviting all these people is because, probably, if you're in a business setting, you want better results. And it actually does work that way. There's lots of studies saying that when you invite different perspectives and you work in a diverse environment, and these people also get to actually speak, you find better solutions. So that's why it's worth it. And sometimes we have to think about the impact goal, have it in mind. You know, why am I even doing this? Oh yeah, I'm doing it because I actually want better results, and I want to achieve the impact that I set out to achieve. So anthropology is like an invitation to think about what happens on the small scale, what happens in the meeting room, what happens every day, how do you actually interact with people? And you as a cultural agent, how are you inviting these people to dance, not just to the party?
Yes, it's really the right point, the dancing point. Yes, because often it is the way you said. We have this, but it's not working because they are not dancing. And that's, of course, it's a question of energy. And often there are some apologize, we have no room, no time, no whatever. But it's a key, it's a key to do that, and to give room for the energy, or to make place that we have energy there for. Yes. And yes, of course, it's for these new possibilities, or the new things we knew about new work or new communities, although in the working place. And that's, for me, it's very interesting how they try to develop and to put energy in that, and to have a place for special meetings where they all give room for how do we communicate, how do feel everybody around the table. And that I think it's or could be the first steps, and that is good also possible, of course, in big companies and big players.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing, that it comes down to those methods and rituals. That's a really good step. But the part that, so I think in order to get there, you've already done the first step of questioning what's normal, because you realize we probably need some other processes here. But the important thing also is to not forget the third thing, which is, okay, so you have a ritual, you have a new meeting structure, for example, and everyone's supposed to share their genuine feelings at the moment. You might be doing it as a check-in or something. Okay, but if the person who called the meeting, who's also the leader of the company, for example, if that person answers the question of how are you genuinely feeling today by saying, well, right now I'm just thinking about my inbox, what's going to become of that? Or how safe is everyone else going to feel around the table of sharing things like, well, I'm actually incredibly worried because I noticed that we have a global pandemic, and actually right now I'm not even sure I can focus because I'm pretty scared. That's a very different level of talking about genuine experiences of life. And the thing is, it should also come from the top, because we're so afraid a lot of the times of being punished for sticking outside of the norm somehow. And that's why it's not just building rituals, it's also showing up in them within, like, basically you yourself being the kind of culture that you would want to create, especially if you're in a position of power.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the best places to start.
Yeah, of course. And the pandemic, the corona situation gives room and place for new leaders who do that, who give, because the emotional part of this whole situation is a really big one, more than ever, I would say. You know? So as you are in Stockholm, what is the situation there, and how did you, go through this phase or this corona situation?
Well, so first of all, I'm in Sweden. I don't normally live in Sweden. So it was kind of a new thing. It's old in a way because I grew up here in Stockholm. But, you know, settling into an old life as a new kind of developed person, because I was only here as a child, that's very strange. And it took some energy to resettle here, because I've been here now for 3 months, even though I thought I might be here for 2 or 3 weeks or something. Okay. So a lot of it has been unpredictable, but actually it's been very nice in the sense that here most people know by now that it's been a bit more open. And so I've had the privilege of a car and access to the countryside, and the Swedish archipelago is really beautiful, and I basically spent a lot of time out in nature focusing on my personal growth. So, you know, developing a stronger vision for my life as a person. I think it was a good window to do that. And it's, for a lot of people, it's been super difficult, and I'm not any different. I mean, my first week of Corona madness was basically a breakup and coming home and changing all of my routines. And I think March felt like the longest month of my life. And it's been hard to see so much suffering in the world. But it's also, I'm also quite excited by how many people around me and in general are seeing opportunity in this. Because, as we said, the normal has changed. So there's really opportunity for long-term change. So I can only say that I started in a true crisis, like mostly everyone else. And now I'm seeing a lot of options and a lot of opportunities, which is kind of an exciting place to be. And now I've also scheduled my trip back to Berlin. So it's like I'm coming full circle now.
Full circle now, yes. Yes, but many people use this time to come to the essence, to the essential things and to realize what is essence. And although have time for develop themselves, but although they're reactive, their family and something like that, and some new rituals like playing games or whatever they are all doing. Yes, it's very interesting. And therefore, when you perhaps you can give me some private data. You grew up in Sweden, and then you, yes, something. It sounds like you travel the world, or how was the development process for yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stockholm, but my family also spent some time in Japan when I was really young. And my mom is Norwegian American. So I've always had a lot of different kind of compatible, kind of incompatible cultural references when I was growing up. And we traveled a lot as a child. So I always kind of had this sense of curiosity. Like there's definitely not just one way of doing things. And I was always a little bit different from my purely Swedish friends. So that was really exciting. And I've definitely, like you said, definitely kept up the traveling. Although actually my anthropology thesis at Cambridge was something I wrote in Denmark. Because I was really interested to see, for countries that we think of as being very close, there are actually a lot of differences. And this idea of questioning normal, we should be doing it everywhere. It's not just that, I travel to India and I do a cultural study of how different everything is. No, I can actually go to Denmark and see how different everything is. So that's been really exciting. But yeah, I started out like that. I was doing filmmaking. I actually left high school to work full time in the film industry. I was making a lot of exciting choices, even as a young person, hopefully. But then I went back to school, went to Cambridge, really pursued the academic route, and then worked in AI in London, and then the tech scene in Berlin. And now I'm at the point where, so I left my full-time role at hubraum, but I'm still working there in the digital communications. And now I'm basically connecting with lots of different people who share this idea of impact and methods and interdisciplinary thinking, and finding new and exciting projects and challenges to solve. So this for me is a point where sometimes you can have strong values, as you said, you can come to the essence, and then at some point projects appear, and that's basically where I'm at right now.
Wow. And do you have already some concrete projects, or can you tell something about the upcoming things?
For example, recently I worked with a big Swedish environmental NGO to basically think about how their ideas of impact could also be measured in numbers. Because that's a struggle that a lot of people have when they work with community or the environment, that you want long-term change, but you got to show results as well. So how do you balance that? And then I used my knowledge of statistics and my understanding of qualitative outcomes from anthropology, and also this digital marketing toolkit of analytics and numbers and crunching data. And I combined all of these into a strategy for them to be able to measure their impact more effectively. So that's an example of combining all these different ideas and skills into fulfilling a genuine need for someone who's trying to achieve impact. And what I'm focused on now is has a lot to do with how we can build better bridges between these different disciplines and perspectives, and especially how the startup mentality that I learned in London, of how you can grow so fast and be so ambitious and so effective and efficient, how you could apply that and bring more of that mindset over into some social impact ventures that tend to be more focused on grassroots effects, grassroots movements growing slowly, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's incredibly needed. But I want to help to amplify this notion that social impact ventures could be the new normal of business, and that most companies, if they want to stay relevant, will have to have like an actual genuine goal and passion for the impact that they're creating in communities and for the environment. Because if anything, right now we're all looking for solutions to bigger problems than just a market need.
Okay. Yes. And do you think disruptive methods are better than slight changing, or because of course, especially in the tech scene, we have a lot of disruption. And do you think it's better, or is it working better? Because yes, many people are very scared and go to the autopilot, of course, because it's not safe to be in this disruptive structures. But not often it's the way it works, isn't it?
Such an interesting question.
Mm.
Personally, I would say that I'm pretty pragmatic, but also I would call it a pragmatic idealist, maybe. So if the idealist part would be that you have goals and visions, so it's not like you're just a pragmatist working with what works. Now you know where you want to go, but you kind of realize, and I think it's a part of humility as well, that your ideal route that you saw coming maybe sometimes doesn't always work. Mm-hmm. And you need to be a pragmatist in certain respects. Because if you're going to create any lasting change, you need other people on board. And it's exactly what you said. People get scared and they refuse this major, major disruption because it's just too much to handle. And I think we got to understand that that's a human response and have respect for it, because that's how we're wired. It's very hard to argue with yourself when you're incredibly frightened about something like that. So my approach has been, because I'm so passionate about communications as well as anthropology, to really think about narratives. What do we think is true? So for example, when I worked in artificial intelligence in healthcare, that was a huge challenge because healthcare deals with people's lives. So they're not going to want a massive disruption that hasn't been completely validated, because we're not about to kill anyone. That's basically what's at stake.
Yeah, okay.
So as an AI startup working in healthcare, you can't just come in and say, oh, we're disrupting you, move out of the way, we're going to save all the lives. But, if you don't have the evidence to prove it, and if you don't move slowly, and if you haven't changed the narratives around what technology is like, you're not going to be able to have that impact. So my work had a lot to do with trying in whatever ways we could to talk about how this technology, which is data-driven based on, real-life data, could actually amplify and help to shape and perfect what people are already doing. So, a doctor would be doing their job, but the AI could support them in being even more effective in what they do. Or for a pharmaceutical company, AI could really support them in their developing process of those drugs to make sure that they can run through options more quickly, for example, or that you can predict how patients will respond based on how other patients have responded. That would be great. Like a lot of people in the healthcare industry would say that would be great if we could. But you need to think of it as a supporting thing, not as a disrupting thing.
Yeah.
And that's why that's just how it works in that industry. And then there are other industries and other cultures where disruption might fit a bit better because people are ready for change or open to change in a different way. So that's why I'm a pragmatist. What does this culture need to achieve the impact goals that we've set out? Mm-hmm. And there are different tools for that and different narratives for those different cultures.
Yes. Of course, there are needs of a culture, but there are also often some powerful interests of, some humans, maybe leaders, who have perhaps different interests. And of course, it's although to be open and clear, have an analytic, strategic mind to see these interests and to develop positive change through all this. And it's a very tricky way, I would say, especially in the current situation. Yes,
it is. It completely is. And I mean, that's hard. That's a hard nut to crack. But in that moment, when I think about, especially if there are individuals, it depends what level you're working at. But whenever you're thinking about it in terms of individuals, for example, the head of the company wants something different from what most other people do or something. Then I really think about this idea of me having power as a cultural agent. Like, sometimes I think I should never underestimate the power of each and every conversation I have, always, because you never know what people pick up from what you're saying. And even a leader is sensitive to norms and narratives. So, you know, the more conscious, especially if you have critical mass, you don't always, but if you do, if you start shaping that narrative a little bit on purpose so that at least it's on the agenda and you're all talking about it, these people are not immune. They're also human. And I think sometimes people would ask, well, you know, isn't that some kind of manipulation? But I read a really interesting definition of manipulation that's basically saying that manipulation is influence, but with hidden motives. And influence is transparent.
Yes.
So as long as you're open about what you're trying to achieve, there's nothing wrong with being strategic and really taking your power back as someone who does have a lot of influence. Because sometimes I think we don't even realize how much influence we actually have. Even as an intern, you know, whatever position you have, you do have a certain level of influence.
Yeah. Yes, and to be powerful and, of course, self-confident to see that, and to do your reflection all the time. Yes, it's a daily work, of course, to see what is needed, no? and what visions and what is your own interests, and to be really honest to yourself, of course. No?
Yeah, exactly. But what I like is that it's not just confidence anymore. It's also, you know, true in a sense. It's just humanity. You know what I mean? Sometimes people who try to influence others do have a strong sense of confidence and they think that they're definitely right in what they're doing and they deserve all this space. But when you come at it from a position of social anthropology or psychology, it's like, well, I don't really care how confident I am. I know I'm having an impact because it's just neurobiology or it's just social psychology. It's just how it works. That makes it a bit easier sometimes. You don't even need to be that confident. I'm telling you right now, you do have an impact. Whether you want to or not. And then the confidence part is more in shaping that you can be conscious about which exact direction you want. Yes. But each and every one of us are having an impact.
Yes, all of us have, yes. Unconscious or conscious, yeah. Of course, yes. And yes, some last questions is about the next 10 years. Of course, we just enter a new decade, a very special decade. First I thought, oh, the golden 20s are coming. No, not really. What is your opinion when you look to 2030, the next 10 years? What do you think should have to be done? What could we achieve? And how can we do that? It's of course a very open question, but I want to hear your opinion.
No, I love that question. I think more visionary questions in the world, especially right now. For me, one thing I would love to see is a private sector that's truly driven by community and environmental goals. We touched upon that earlier. I think it's coming. Yeah. I'm sensing a big shift, even in the big corporates, but also in the startup scene. People are so much more conscious about the impact that they're having. And hopefully by 2030, that's more in the center stage. And I mean, my approach to that is to help shape these narratives around what those kinds of businesses can achieve and what's needed. But there are many, many tools to support that. I'm really hoping that we'll be more culturally sensitive and a bit more curious and listening. That would be the dream. Because it'd be so much easier to build good collaborations when people are also interested in other people. And given how much we're globalizing as a world, basically, it's been moving toward that slowly. And Corona has kind of made it clear that we do have different cultures operating. For example, Sweden, we've been getting a lot of crap in the media from a lot of other countries who are saying, like, you know, what are they doing? How can they be so confident? Why aren't they just locking people up? But the reason we could do that in Sweden is because we have such a strong trust in government and such a strong sense of solidarity, which has been built over years and years politically, that people did stay at home anyway. We didn't need to be locked up. And all of a sudden, we're talking about all these cultural differences. And I'm hoping that in a few years, we'll be even more into that perspective of, okay, so you're from Sweden. That must mean you might have some ideas in this direction. Or you're from the US, you might be thinking like this. Okay, wait, how can we work together? I'm hoping we'll be more like that. And also, I mean, this is how I live my life, but I would love for there to be a stronger interdisciplinary standard for people's CVs, for work in general, you know, and for degrees. Because actually, even though I studied anthropology, I also took 3 other disciplines at the same time for the first year at least. So I did politics and international relations and sociology as well to make sure that I had some different perspectives on it. And I'm hoping that the more we can see the value of all these collaborations, the more people also start to branch out. So you don't have to be in marketing all of your life. Or even in my case, I used to be a filmmaker. I'm using a lot of those tools, but I don't identify in that way anymore, and I picked up some other skills. I'm hoping people will have more room to do that, and that will be more valued.
Yeah.
And then as an add-on, when we're at work, I'm really hoping that this crisis has started a journey of making sure that we can bring our entire selves to work. So it's not just, or it's not such a strong division between being professional and personal. Because now all of a sudden you have people's kids in every meeting on Zoom. You have there was this really, really sweet golden retriever who completely crashed this news anchor's broadcast. That was hilarious. And, you know, people want to see that. We actually have way more patience than we thought. And it's really nice to be open and honest about our genuine experiences. And I think that would be so much better for our mental health. So I'm hoping that when we become more in touch with culture and feelings and different perspectives, we can also bring our whole selves to work.
Yes. And it's, yes, I agree totally. It's although, especially when it comes to mental health, because many people are suffering before Corona, and of course, just now about how, yes, their mental health can be created, or how can they grow and believe and to have all these different challenges and can be one person again and not a different one, and to have to split inside. And that is a whole suffering. I in my surrounding, I have a lot of appearance of that, especially in the younger generation, because they have all these social media and everything, and they cannot choose or have any methods how develop through all these things. It's very interesting, yes. Yeah, wow. And what's your own vision? Where you said you have new projects are going on when you come to Berlin again, and what are your next steps?
Well, right now I'm working with all kinds of people, meeting all kinds of people, and normally there's this idea that when you navigate a complex situation where everything's moving around, it's better to probe. So, you know, you meet someone, you have a look, you sense whether it's going in any direction or not, and then you step back, you move in a different direction. So I don't have a plan, but I have an approach, I would say. So right now I'm meeting lots of different people. I'm sowing a lot of seeds as a cultural agent, you know, talking about these things with lots of people. And I think I'm mainly working on amplifying other people who are doing great things. So for example, when I find startups who are working in social impact, doing a great job, they're profitable and they have an impact, those are the people that I want to support so that the world knows about them. And that sometimes you need role models, not as people, but also as companies. Like, you know, when we saw something like Airbnb become massive, everyone starts thinking, oh, wait, actually, what about the sharing economy? Wait, there's way more we can do here. If they were successful, surely there are other ways we can apply this method. And that's what I want to do. I want to help tell stories of what's possible so that we start changing the idea of normal. And for me, that's always working towards the social and environmental and culturally aware world. So, you know, whoever's working on that, I want to amplify them.
Wow, yes. It's really cool. And of course, I put all your contacts in the show notes so that everybody who wants to hear that and is motivated or is already a role model or want to create a startup can get in contact and reach out to you. Thank you so much, Ida, for this wonderful interview and for these insights you gave. And I hope we inspire a lot of people to do the same and to make a change and an impact in the world.
Thank you, Maria, for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you. And bye-bye and see you soon in Berlin again.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.